In this art history video, we'll dive into the world of Edgar Degas, an artist who was considered an impressionist, but in fact despised the term. Degas preferred to create art indoors, studying his subjects carefully, while many impressionists painted in open air, spontaneously. Degas is known for painting and sculpting dancers, which we'll learn were actually quite controversial during his time. Degas was born in Paris in 1834 and began painting early on in his life. His mother was not from Paris, but from New Orleans, an amateur opera singer, and his father a banker. A moderately wealthy family, but not without financial problems and tensions. In fact, after Degas' father died when Degas was just 40 years old, it was discovered that his brother had amassed large debts. Degas was forced to sell his own art collection and focus on making an income from his art. But before we dive into the art of Degas, let's take a look at what else was going on in history during the 1870s when Degas was making art. In 1870, the Franco-Prussian War had broken out. The German states were quickly unifying under what was then called Prussia, and Napoleon III in France was concerned about this shift in power, and France declared war on Prussia. Degas joined the French National Guard, where at the age of 36 found out that his eyesight was beginning to fail him. The war ended in less than a year. France, however, was defeated and Germany gained power, so Degas decided to head to America to visit his family in New Orleans and avoid the post-war chaos in Europe. Now, in America at this time, the Civil War had ended and slavery had been abolished less than 10 years earlier in 1865. Social tensions were strong in the South, especially among cotton farmers who had relied on slavery for their business. And Degas' family was in the cotton brokerage business. Things were soon to change for them. Degas decided to paint his observations. In a cotton office in New Orleans, he painted his brother and uncle, just a few years before their cotton brokerage business went bankrupt. Degas seems to be telling us that something was about to change for these seemingly relaxed and wealthy businessmen. Now, after his trip to New Orleans, Degas returned to Paris and began to explore new ways of painting with Claude Monet and a group of artists called the Anonymous Society of Artists. These artists wanted to break free from the control of the Paris Salon, where art was exhibited and artists were made known. The Salon dictated rules around painting, but many artists wanted to experiment with new ways of making art. So Degas began to take on an approach to art that was distinct, even from his fellow Impressionist artists. He had a more classical approach to making art, carefully studying and preparing his paintings. He despised the spontaneous nature of Impressionist art. Degas greatly revered old masters like Eugene Delacroix and Jean-Auguste Henri. Degas had even previously been accepted by the Salon of Paris to show his history paintings. But like the modernist artists, he wanted to move beyond creating traditional art. He wanted to paint life as he saw it, with images from real life, rather than history or literature. Degas thus considered himself a realist artist, studying and painting how he saw everyday life, real people, their movements and unusual postures. He frequently attended operas at the Palais Garnier and studied and painted the dancers backstage and onstage. Degas showed a distinctive approach to color, light, and motion. This may have been because he was extremely sensitive to light and suffered from weak eyesight. He almost created an impression of an image, which is why many consider Degas an impressionist. Degas, however, clearly differentiated himself because he disliked their concept of painting in the open air, outdoors. He preferred painting alone and indoors. He eventually even alienated himself from his friends and other artists. He believed that artists must live alone. Degas' eyesight increasingly failed him, and by 57 he would become nearly blind. As a result, he sought sculpture as a more tactile form of creating art. His ballerina sculpture is one of the most well-known of his works today, but at the time was harshly criticized. While the bronze sculpture was masterfully crafted, he added a real tutu and bodice on his dancer, which shocked audiences. Today, Degas is known for being one of the most remarkable artists in history. From his paintings to sculptures to soft pastels, the way he approached art was unique, from the materials he used to the subjects he chose and the way he portrayed them. He inspires us to study art and create our own art.